Hey everyone, it's me, Buster Green. Alright, so I try not to get into Japanese politics too much because, honestly, politics is just overall a pretty big shit show, and I don't want to offend anyone because sometimes I might have the wrong take on something, or I'm missing key information, or I don't know enough about what I'm talking about. And just because Japan is a cool, beautiful place, Japanese politics is as bad and as gritty and as weird and unexpected as personal politics go anywhere. Anyway, despite that, every once in a while, you can always get a fun joke election that gets completely ruined by batshit insane joke candidates, like a guy who thinks he's a Joker in full Heath Ledger cosplay, running up against a porn star who wants free publicity for a new DVD release. So anyway, I'm putting this video out today to talk about a rising star in the Japanese political world named Kimi Onoda, and what is her deal?
この番組は予覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
I guess there's this thing happening lately with politics internationally, this new trend where people will try to shine a spotlight on a candidate's worst quality and be like, are we sure about this person 100%? Are we sure they're not a gangster, not a child molester, or secretly trying to burn down the city and replace it with robots? Or a robot service center. I guess that's always been kind of a thing in politics. But yeah, because people are weirder these days and people are more concerned about that, it's way easier to be oh, hey, that lady kills dogs for fun. Maybe we shouldn't give her power over a large group of human beings. Anyway, back to Japan. So I'm currently giving the new Japanese Prime Minister an overall hands-off approach because I can't say we've had a good Japanese Prime Minister in a while, and I can't say I know that much about her, but people are very hot-blooded about her, polarized one way or the other, and they're very concerned that she might do something bad, she might be a little bit radical, but she's at least the first female Prime Minister, and she's coming in after a lame duck administration, so I get the sense on the ground is that even though she could do something wrong, she hasn't done anything wrong yet. So a lot of people are just giving her the benefit of the doubt. If she does something crazy later, I'll let you know. Anyway, now that we've had one female prime minister, there's some people saying that Kimi Onoda could be the next female prime minister. And is that a good thing? And for that matter, who is she? And why is she trending for being so weird? What the heck is so weird with her? And so that's the question I want to get into today. The question I'm asking myself, is this girl cool and should I like her? And does she someday deserve to run Japan? Okay, so first things first, I'm going to present you with the most factual version of her from Wikipedia and the public narrative around her, and then we're going to get into the deeper discussion that's going on this week and all the dirty rumors about her, which are completely unproven. And I'm also going to warn you that this is going to be a longer video than I've done in a minute. It's going to start off a little bit boring because I have to lay a foundation here and do some groundwork about who she is basically before I get into the nitty-gritty. But stick around because eventually we're going to talk about hentai games and how maybe or maybe not that's all going to impact the future of Japan and how it's this lady's fault. All right, so Kimi Onoda, here's a picture of her. She grew up in rural Okayama, Japan, and she's an only child. Said to be a bit of a homebody, didn't get out much as a kid, and then as an adult, she moved to Tokyo and had a life. Then at the age of 28, for whatever reason, she pivots hard into politics out of nowhere. She gets elected to the Tokyo Local Assembly and is notable for being one of its youngest members. Then in 2016, she resigns to run for the House of Councilors, representing Okayama Prefecture, her home prefecture. She wins, and then in 2020, she's moved up to a higher office. She's moved up to the high office of the Vice Minister of Justice for all of Japan. And then 2022, she's just switched to the Vice Minister of Defense, which is all very boring stuff. Now, her career only gets exciting more recently in the past 2 months with the rise of the first female Prime Minister, Takaichi. She looks at Onoda as the youngest woman in the cabinet and decides to give her some pretty incredible power. Now, I'm not sure if this was Takaichi's design or Onoda's request, but Onoda is promoted to Minister of the State, getting a massive boost in power and holding a whopping 4 preliminary roles. And it's not like she's holding these temporarily. It seems like she's just permanently doing the jobs of 4 separate people simultaneously for the ongoing future. So as of now, she's now the Minister of Economic Security, the Minister of Science and Technology, the Japanese Minister of Outer Space, and the Minister of Intellectual Property Strategy. And I'm like, oh my God, I think that's too much on her plate. I would maybe give the entirety of outer space to someone else to handle, but yeah, that's what we're dealing with right now. Now, additionally, on top of this, just now, recently, Takeichi had also assigned Onoda a fifth role as minister in charge of society and harmonious coexistence with foreign nationals, making her... That's a whopper to say. But long story short, she's now in charge of Japanese foreigner management and the policy in regards to foreign citizens in Japan. And that's kind of where she first gets on international radar, because that is a huge and heavy role, especially in current politics, especially with like everything going on in America. And the perplexing thing is Onoda is actually only half Japanese. She's also half Irish American, and her backstory is pretty complicated. So digging into her backstory, supposedly her mom lived in the US and her dad is rumored to be a Marine. And according to the story, after 2 years, the dad abandons the mom, and the mom, having no financial support, had to move back to Okayama. However, I feel like mentioning here that there are always these stories of fed up Japanese mothers kidnapping their children back to Japan and ghosting the fathers. And it's a popular conspiracy theory online that Onoda could have had a mother like that, but no one can find her father to verify his side of the story anyway. So if that happened, that's kind of sad. And if that's true, that's also sad that she could have had a completely different life in America. But that's not what happened. She grew up in Japan. From the age of 2, she's cut off from America, and she ends up becoming completely naturalized into Japanese culture. She eventually becomes a Japanese citizen, and that's all well and good, but then she gets into trouble later in life when she gets into politics. It comes out that she has dual citizenship, and that's scandalous because under Japanese law, you're supposed to renounce your dual citizenship after the age of 22 or after you finish college if you plan on staying in Japan full time. And according to her, she just didn't know about that. So she renounced it then and there on the spot. And so far, that's the only big scandal of her career until this current kerfuffle. Now, strictly on the negative side of things, the Takeichi cabinet is following the footsteps of anti-immigrant xenophobia campaigns happening kind of everywhere in the world right now. And in Japan, that's extra complicated because Japan opening up to immigrants was seen as one of the only quick solutions that was non-sci-fi to the country's devastating lack of babies and the critical depopulation problem happening in Japan at the current moment, where supposedly, according to some scientists, if Japan keeps not having babies, there will be 0 ethnically Japanese people existing in the world in the next 200 years. And I will say that when I was in Japan this year, after coming back from when I lived there 10 years ago, I was kind of surprised, borderline shocked, to see that there were way more foreigners and way more overweight people there compared to 10 years ago when there were virtually none. But anyway, back to overall immigration problems with Japan. I'm pretty mixed on that because on the one hand, like, I did try to immigrate to Japan. I was a foreign national living in Japan 10 years ago, and I basically didn't make it. I didn't succeed because there was just so much stacked against me, so many hurdles I had to overcome. And like overall, like, it broke me, and there was just like too many problems. It wasn't worth it in the end, and I got frustrated and I came back to the US a failure. So if she's making that system worse, then that sucks. But on the other hand, like in the past couple of years, Japan has had like a real problem like nuisance tourism and nuisance streamers like Logan Paul, Ice Poseidon, Johnny Somali, who like went around like assaulting people in broad daylight for like YouTube clicks with like no consequences, and that completely sucks. And supposedly there are like always the occasional horror stories about like foreign nationals who just randomly go to Japan, commit a crime, and like embarrass their home countries and like make it harder for all the immigrants who come next. So yeah, overall the system is out of whack, but supposedly Onoda is being propped up by the Takeichi administration as the perfect foreign immigrant who did everything right, renounced America, and is now therefore in charge of the immigration policy. And like, I don't really like her being used as a prop in this context, but I suppose it's at least fair that they're at least letting an immigrant decide the immigration policy. I think that is kind of cool. So I do think that she does have perspective on the problem, so I appreciate them putting her into that role. And I guess I hope she just overall does the right thing and uses common sense. So that's the end of the story about like the public facing Onoda. Now let's get into the other side, her so-called dark side. And that's the part that I want to talk about today. And that's the part that interests me because it's come out in the news today that Kimi Onoda is also the queen of the otaku. And that's effing crazy and hilarious and funny. And I want to get into that. So aside from her spooky role as model immigration, lead immigration overseer, the rest of her existence is shockingly very cool, at least in my opinion. And literally, it's cool that she's cool because as Japan's economic minister, she's the current leader of the long-running Cool Japan project, a long-running soft power exercise where Japan, after being told for years they were cool, has tried to like capitalize that, has tried to one-up themselves, is constantly trying to make the best and coolest stuff in the world because people like when they do that. And as I literally went to Japan this year just to do Cool Japan stuff, I kind of like everything she's doing with that. And yeah, I can kind of see that it's really interesting with all the power that Onoda has been given by the government this year. Like aside from the immigration thing, the rest of her titles seem to be given to her strictly for the purpose of consolidating the Cool Japan strategy into a single person and like one massive power grab strategy, because they basically gave her like the infinity gauntlet of Cool Japan powers in relation to the Cool Japan project. Like if you think about the 4 titles they gave her, it's like crazy like that these all line up strictly for the sake of Cool Japan. Like she's economic security. Economic security started the Cool Japan project. But then she's science and technology. That's the robots and stuff. Arguably, robots are freaking cool. Then she's also in charge of outer space. What's not cooler than outer space? And lastly, she's got intellectual property strategy, which is like basically all the movies and all the anime. So one single woman controls all of the anime, all the movies, outer space, all the robots, and the economy. That's kind of nuts. Like, theoretically, if she wanted to flex her awesome power with no pushback, she could seize the IP for One Piece, have the science department build her a giant space TV, use the space department to send that TV into space, and then literally have a giant TV floating in outer space that plays every episode of One Piece on a loop. I mean, that's what I would do if I was her, but I'm sure she'll come up with something cooler and more subtle. But I should rewind and get into why this woman is apparently the queen of the otaku, and how her becoming the minister of Cool Japan is the final step in her weird strategy to control and protect Japanese pop culture, which I also find respectable. Anyway, overall, like just at a glance, like from her being the minister of Cool in Japan, she sounds interesting and borderline relatable. It sounds like she grew up in the countryside, was kind of ostracized in some way for being half Japanese, and she took comfort in video games and anime as a kid, which I can completely relate to because it sounds like she had the same childhood as me. It sounds like she's basically me. And then her adult life is also really interesting. So there was kind of like a blank in her career before she gets into politics, a blank of 8 years. And I figured out what she did in that blank of 8 years. Like, here's the job she's reported to have held in the blank. And I'm not sure if I've got these in the correct order here, but I'm just going to list these in terms of like power scaling order. It sounds like she first tried to make it as a model, but that didn't work out. Then she tried to be a receptionist for the Sony store in Ginza, which is a pretty low tier job. Then she was a teacher for a little bit. But probably the biggest and weirdest and strangest chapter of her life in her career is that for most of it before she got into politics, Onoda was a yaoi director. She was apparently hired at this hentai company named Asgard, which specializes in making boy love drama CDs and visual novel video games, and she apparently stayed there long enough to work up the ladder from marketing assistant to public relations manager before finally making it as a visual novel game director. And apparently she was majorly involved in the production of this visual novel called Starry Sky Spring Stories, which is like this boy love hentai game on the PS Vita, which gives you a kind of interesting look at who she really is deep down. Now, what went viral this week is just a long like circumstance of people kind of taking a closer look at her and kind of starting to realize who she really is and taking away some pretty interesting observations here. But that's just scratching the surface, because what happened this week is even weirder because people started looking at her closely with their irises out. And what happened this week is what went viral was a collection of posts she made on Twitter that someone managed to consolidate and scrutinize every Twitter post Onoda ever made about her like personal / dating life. And a weird recurring pattern emerged. And the long story short is that looking at all these posts in context, many people are drawing the conclusions that Onoda is a femcel. So yeah, the big scandal going viral in Japan right now is apparently the news that Onoda is a femcel, short for female incel. It's not exactly the same as an incel, only female. Like, to really break it down and explain it clearly, lately in society, we've had a rise of incels who are men who are maladjusted, ugly, or just don't want to put in the work to like clean themselves up to attract a female partner. So they eventually declare a war on all women and then eventually have psychotic breaks and resort to either violence or becoming like a political extremist. And femcels are considered a lot rarer than incels since they usually keep to themselves and don't socialize. But yeah, like oddly enough, Onoda does perfectly fit the femcel archetype because she grew up lonely, was a socially maladjusted pro-gamer, addicted to hentai, and she ultimately became a political extremist, except ironically she did it the right way, and she ended up in a high-ranking position in an extremist political party that now controls a majority of Japan. Although now, the big hilarious twist though, that because Onoda is this boy love Fujiyoshi, who apparently has boldly declared that she is openly only attracted to anime men, 2D boys to use the otaku terminology, she is straight up criticizing 3D men compared to 2D boys on a level that I've previously only seen exhibited by like Daru, the fat level 200 otaku in like Steins Gate. Let me take a second to go over a couple of these posts because they're pretty insane. The possibility of getting married feels so utterly creepy to me. I don't consider 3D real life people as romantic prospects. Hurry up and get married, have kids. I've been told this by voters since my 20s, and I'll say it over and over, I'm 2D exclusive. I've been saying this for a while now, but I don't consider 3D real-life people as romantic prospects. I'm dead serious, not joking. For me, the very act of someone seeing the possibility of marriage in me is inherently uncomfortable. What I demand from a man isn't money or power. Those things are irrelevant to me. The one non-negotiable absolute condition is that he's a handsome 2D anime guy. That is it. I'm not interested in 3D guys. I'm not falling into a distorted state or despairing. Whether this is natural or unnatural, etc., values vary from person to person. Yet categorizing them and linking them casually to factors, whatever, feels like a smokescreen for me. It's like if someone was vegan and then you told them veganism was a natural, it goes against the natural desires. So what? I'm a heterosexual woman, just not for 3D men. I won't even cheat on my 2D boyfriend. And yada, yada, yada. Okay. Banquet says, that's burgers. How old was she when she said all that? It sounds like she was at least like 35 because people were asking her about when she was like settling down, like before she hit menopause and all that. I want to say she's currently like 42. I think it says that on like her profile card. So she really is this like ultra extremely rotten perverted otaku woman. And I don't know, I think that's funny, but like a lot of people are having a lot of hot takes on this. Then the post goes on to show her angrily rejecting any male advances over the years and hating on like dating in general, while complaining about 3D men as she exists in Japan for years, slowly rising up the political ladder, declaring that while she's heterosexual, she views 2D boys and 3D men as completely separate species, that her having sex with a human man would be like asking her to have sex with a monkey or any other lesser animal, while constantly being told to start a family and get pregnant, while vehemently refusing because she'd rather be going to boys in her visual novel. And hey, I'm sort of a 2D, sort of Irish, sort of American, sort of Japanese 2D guy. Onoda, can we talk? Anyway, her views on things are really fascinating considering that she is half American, and her backstory. Most armchair psychologists are wondering out loud that she might have father issues, but I'm very curious and I wonder if maybe she's just not into Japanese dudes, or maybe just not if they're 3D anyway. Maybe she needs to get out more. Maybe that seems to be part of the stereotype. Anyway, after the initial shock of holy crap, this ultra powerful woman in the government is a femcel hentai gooner wore off, as I did look deep into her otaku side and the things she's done, the more I actually come to like appreciate her, because I'm ultimately landing that I do think she might be kind of a secret weapon in the culture war right now. Like one of the big things that's come up in the 2 months since Takaichi rose to power in Japan has been her status as an ultra right-wing conservative authoritarian who could potentially drive Japan back into its war empire roots, and who everyone was kind of concerned that on top of being bad for the world, teetering us into World War III, it could potentially damage anime culture and just make Japan boring, make there be like less like sexually explicit video games and all that other fun stuff. Now, seemingly, ironically, Onoda is the first and biggest barrier against that, because Onoda freaking loves that stuff. She apparently loves anime and like crazy video games so much that she's willing to go to bat for the industry at all levels everywhere, and she is vehemently against any sort of censorship of any sort of creative work, Anything that ironically limits freedom of the artist, no matter how perverse or how horrific the work may be, Onoda wants it to like go full freak flag there. Like, ironically, it seems like you can take the girl out of the hentai industry and put her in charge of Japan. But in this case, it seems like you can't take the hentai industry out of the girl. And this hentai industry brain girl could end up being the next prime minister of Japan, which would be hilarious. Her apparent pro-otaku policies are actually one of the main things that apparently makes her so popular in Japan. And apparently prior to her meteoric rise in power, she had an ongoing thing where she would still cosplay as anime schoolgirls late into her 40s. And yes, since I make anime, I'm 100% behind her that she should definitely just let the anime industry do whatever the fuck they want and be protected at all costs, especially as other countries are falling off in like terms of teaching basics animation and like making animation themselves and like government censorship and like all that other crazy shit. She's also gotten a lot of good karma recently for reaching out to the big players in the animation industry. She's supposedly hosted symposiums with like Hideaki Anno and Oda from One Piece, and she's been making sure that any of those concerns that they have are being immediately enacted on by the Japanese government. So anyway, she's also been in the news this week because she's been doing her job right. She's apparently been fighting the good fight against the Chinese who have been censoring Japanese artists as part of like this ongoing complicated culture war beef that sprung up recently between China and Japan. I'm not sure who started what because there's a lot of like he said, she said there about what the inciting first incident was, but it's looking pretty ugly on both sides of the sea there. Anyway, the scandal about her views on 2D versus 3D people, though, is the thing that's currently going viral this week, with people finding it kind of admirable that she's the otaku in chief. But in Japan, a lot of people are like saying that this is a bad look and having a lot of negative takes on this as it becomes a scandal. It's definitely drawing some radical responses from like her quotes with people saying that she might be a little bit unhinged. She might be a little bit autistic, especially her views that 2D anime characters are as important, if not more important to her as real living people that are her constituents, and her weird division between how she views fake 2D people and real 3D people with that like basic hostility there is definitely seen as like some level of unhinged, maybe a sign that maybe someone with such a warped view of what a basic human is, like maybe shouldn't have that much like awesome power. And of course, there's plenty of people just being racist towards her because she's half American and all that. So I guess that's my full view at a glance of who Onoda is coming in cold today. I think she's a die-hard otaku with some unclear American roots who has recently obtained the full power of most of Japan's coolest stuff. And she's willing to defend that cool stuff with her life, and I respect her for that. Even if she has to go up against her own party, that's kind of based. Actually, honestly, the fact that she is so diehard about defending anime does make me hopeful that she is going to do the right thing for immigration too, and that if she does become prime minister someday, I think she has the potential to be one of the coolest prime ministers ever. But that's the whole breakdown I have with her. Let me know if you missed anything. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you love her, if you hate her. Is her hatred of 3D men a big crazy red flag? If you yourself are a 3D man, are you offended by her 3D hating comments in this 3D world? Anyway, it's sort of a mini scandal this week, but a lot of people are like just kind of coming in cold here and like not knowing who she is and just like reacting and being like, what the fuck is going on here? But yeah, as I've read into her, I gotta like give her some credit for defending the anime industry. That does seem kind of admirable. All right, I guess that's the whole video. I'm Buster Green. I will see you guys next time when hopefully I'm back to covering whatever the hell is going on with Gojuger and Gavon and all the fun shows we like to watch.